Most people think financial freedom is about making more money. But there's a quieter truth nobody talks about. It's about what you stop carrying. Right now, at 25 to 44 years old, you're probably holding 5 things that feel normal but are actually draining your future. Not like emergency expenses or legitimate debts. These are things you chose. Things that made sense once, but now they're just quietly expensive. And the strange part is, you've gotten used to them. Your brain stopped seeing them as costs. In a minute, I'll show you exactly what these 5 things are. And more importantly, how to know if you're carrying one right now without even realizing it. But first, here's why this matters. If you're in your 30s or 40s and making decent money but still feel broke, this is probably why most financial advice tells you to earn more or invest smarter. That's not wrong, but it skips over something fundamental: you can invest your way out of carrying dead weight. This is the part people overlook because it feels too simple. The math is straightforward, but the psychology is harder. We keep things because they're familiar. We keep things because we paid for them once. We keep things because saying no feels like losing something. So let's walk through the 5 most common assets and commitments that are silently destroying wealth building for people just like you. The first one looks like security, but it's actually your biggest expense. It's the apartment or house that's too big for your actual life. Now, before you think this doesn't apply to you, hear me out. This isn't about living in a closet or making a dramatic downsize. It's about the gap between what you're paying for and what you're actually using. Here's how this plays out for most people. You buy a house or sign a lease in your late 20s or early 30s because it feels like an accomplishment and it offers more space than you need. Maybe you think you'll fill the rooms with kids or a home office. Maybe the building has a gym you never go to or a concierge service you don't use. Maybe you live in a 3-bedroom and you use 1.5. Housing costs times 12 months equals annual expense. And when you actually look at it, somewhere between 20 to 35% of your gross income is going to a physical structure. That's not hypothetically, that's the average American household right now. And results vary by market and situation, but let me show you what happens when you actually measure the real cost. A typical person making $75K per year is paying roughly $18K to $22K annually on housing. That's not including utilities, maintenance, or opportunity cost of the down payment sitting in equity instead of invested elsewhere. Over 10 years, that's $180K to $220K in direct payments plus compound losses on what else that money could have done. The second thing most people don't realize they're carrying is financial responsibility for adult children. This one is brutal because it feels like love and it feels like duty, but it's actually a wealth killer. Here's what this looks like in real life. You've got an adult child, maybe 22 to 35, and you're still paying for their phone bill, their car insurance, their apartment deposit, or their college classes. Or you're loaning them money that you both know will never come back. It started as temporary help, but temporary became permanent. And now it's just part of your budget. The psychological trap here is intense because you're comparing your life now to your parents' support of you. And the rules feel different. The numbers don't care about emotion though. $200 per month on their phone bill, times 12 months equals $2,400 per year. And if you've been doing this for 5 years, that's $12,000 that didn't go into your emergency fund or your own retirement account. But more than the money, this is about attention and emotional labor. Supporting an adult child consumes mental space you don't have. You're worried about them. You're checking in. You're stressed about when you can cut it off without feeling like a bad parent. The most successful wealth builders in their 40s all have the same boundary. They stopped this by age 35 or 40. Not because they didn't love their kids, because they realized that at your age you have limited time to build your own security, and they have decades to build theirs. The third thing is hobby assets. You don't actually use. This is where most people feel the sting, because these items often feel like freedom or identity. It might be a motorcycle you ride once a year. Once a year, a boat you share with a friend but still pay half the dock fees for. A second car you've convinced yourself you need but you actually drive maybe 15 times per year. A golf club membership you bought for business networking but mostly you feel guilty about. A high-end camera for the photography hobby you might do someday. The psychological trick here is that we keep these things because they represent who we want to be, not who we actually are. You're not a photographer yet. You're not a boater right now. You're someone with $8K to $15K per year, tied up in something that's collecting dust. Here's what the math looks like. A second vehicle costs about $3K to $5K per year just to insure and maintain, plus registration. Add in storage if you live in an apartment, and you're at $4K to $7K minimum. A boat slip at a typical marina runs $250 to $500 per month, plus insurance and fuel, $350 per month, times 12 months, equals $4,200 per year. And if you've owned this for 7 years, that's almost $30,000 you've spent on something you use for 10 days per year. $30,000 divided by 10 days equals $3,000 per day. And suddenly it doesn't feel like freedom anymore. The fourth thing is the second vehicle that started as convenience and became necessity in your head. This is different from the hobby asset because you've convinced yourself you need 2 cars. One for daily driving, one for longer trips or bad weather, or the rare scenario where both of you need to be in different places at the same time. Most people have never actually measured how often that scenario happens. They just assume it's essential. Here's the real story. The second vehicle sits unused 95% of the time. It depreciates. It needs maintenance. It requires insurance and registration, and it takes up physical space in your garage or apartment parking. The actual moments you needed 2 cars probably happened 3 times this year. And in each case, you could have taken an Uber or borrowed a car or adjusted your schedule. The honest truth is that owning a second car is a choice designed for convenience, not necessity. And that convenience is expensive. For most people, it costs between $3K and $8K per year, depending on the age and condition of the vehicle. Over a 10-year ownership cycle, that's $30K to $80K in direct costs, plus the opportunity cost of capital tied up in the car rather than invested. Results vary, but the pattern is consistent. People who eliminate the second vehicle save that money and report they don't miss it within 2 weeks. The fifth thing is the hardest to explain because it's invisible. It's the way you've built your income stream as an employee with multiple side hustles, or as a business owner with too many product lines, or as a creator trying to please every audience segment. You're carrying too many commitments. Your primary job takes 40 to 50 hours per week. You've got a side business that takes another 10 to 15 hours. You're consulting for a friend's startup for equity. You've got a niche YouTube channel. You're still trying to stay relevant in your old industry just in case. Each one individually seems manageable, but together, they're fragmenting your attention, increasing your stress, and actually decreasing the total value you produce. This is the one that shifts how you think about wealth. Most people believe wealth comes from diversifying income, but the real bottleneck for people in their 30s and 40s isn't income variety. It's focus. The people who build the most wealth in this decade are the ones who cut ruthlessly. One job, one clear side project, one main focus. Everything else dies. It feels risky to eliminate options. It feels like you're putting all your eggs in one basket. But the math tells a different story. When you're split across 5 commitments at 70% effort each, you're producing approximately 0.7 to the power of 5, which equals 0.16 of your full potential. You're operating at 16% of maximum output because of context switching and mental fragmentation. When you eliminate 4 of those commitments and go all in on one, you're suddenly operating at 95 to 100% of your potential on one high-leverage project. That produces more money, more growth, and more freedom than 5 mediocre things ever will. Now here's where it gets real. You know intellectually that you should eliminate these 5 things, but you haven't. Because elimination feels like loss, and your brain is wired to avoid loss more aggressively than it pursues gain. This is the part nobody talks about. The actual barrier between carrying dead weight and moving forward isn't information. You know, second vehicles are expensive. You know, supporting adult children delays your retirement. You know, hobby assets don't generate value. The barrier is emotional permission. You need to feel like it's okay to let go. So here's a framework that makes it safe. The first step is measurement. For each thing you're carrying, calculate the actual annual cost. Don't estimate, actually write down the insurance, the maintenance, the opportunity cost, the space it takes up, and the mental load it creates. For housing, include utilities, property tax, HOA fees, and the mortgage interest you're paying versus principal. For hobby assets, include storage, insurance, maintenance, and the true cost per usage hour. For adult child support, include the direct payments plus the emotional labor you'd quantify if it were a job. For the second vehicle, include depreciation, insurance, registration, maintenance, and parking. For the side hustles and business commitments, include the hours spent times your hourly rate plus the opportunity cost of not focusing on the main thing. The second step is a trial period. You don't have to commit to permanent elimination. You commit to a 90-day experiment. Eliminate the thing and measure what actually happens. Don't just measure money. Measure your stress level, your sleep quality, your ability to focus, the time you reclaim, and the number of times you actually needed that thing. For the second car, the 90-day test usually shows you that you needed it 0 times, and your stress about not having it decreased after 3 weeks. For hobby assets, you realize within 2 weeks that you don't miss them because you weren't using them anyway. For adult child support, the test is harder emotionally, but it usually reveals one of 2 things: your adult child adapts quickly, or they double down on dependence and you realize the real issue is different than you thought. For multiple income streams, the test shows you that focusing on the main thing generates more total revenue than scattered efforts ever did. The third step is replacements. Don't just eliminate the expense and sit with empty space. Redirect the money to something that compounds. Put the $3K to $7K per year from the second vehicle into a brokerage account. Redirect the $24K annually from your adult child's phone bill into your emergency fund, or 401K. Put the hobby asset money into your primary business or main career developments. This transforms elimination from loss into redirect. Your brain stops seeing it as I gave up something and starts seeing it as I invested in myself. Now here's the twist. The people who do this successfully don't actually feel like they're sacrificing. They feel like they've removed a weight they'd been carrying so long they forgot it was there. Most retire or reach financial independence 3 to 5 years earlier than their peers. Not because they made more money, but because they stopped wasting it on things they didn't actually value. 3 things to hold on to as you're thinking about that. First, elimination isn't about living small. It's about living intentionally. You're not saying no to everything. You're saying yes to the things that actually matter, and no to the things that are just taking up space in your financial life. Second, this works because it compounds in both directions. When you eliminate $500 per month in waste, that's $6,000 per year. Invested at a reasonable return, that's $7,200 after year 1, $8,600 after year 2, and eventually much larger numbers. You're not just saving money, you're starting a growth curve that accelerates. Third, the permission you need is just this. Your life in 5 years will be better if you make hard choices now than if you keep being comfortable with mediocre ones. The question isn't whether you can afford to eliminate these things, it's whether you can afford not to.